Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The Brooks, the river, and what's next for Overton Park tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Tina Sullivan, Executive Director of the Overton Park Conservancy. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you.
Emily Ballou-Neff is Executive Director of the Brooks Museum of Art. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you, Eric.
Alan Crone is a Special Policy Advisor to Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Along with Bill Dries, Senior Reporter with the Memphis Daily News. So I will start with you, Emily, with a question you've probably gotten probably 100 to 2,000 times in the last month or two. Why in the world, I'm sure people say, some say, would the Brooks want to move?
I can understand that a number of people were really shocked by the news. After all, we have been in beautiful and historic Overton Park for over 100 years. And what I would say to your listeners is that the Brooks board and staff has been trying to address one of the challenges that we have operationally to one of the three parts of the building that we are now housed in. And the board's been trying to address that since 1993. Everything was teed up around 2008 to finally address those operational problems. And of course, the Great Recession happened and everything was mothballed. So for the past 18 months, the board created a new long-range planning committee, which spent 18 months going through a 90-page document with a fine-tooth comb to assess our physical constraints within the park, to come up with some options, and basically what long-range planning after an 18-month period concluded is that we needed to put all options on the table. It's not just a matter of a cost-benefit analysis, that it was not going to be that much more to start over anew, but that was certainly part of it. And so by the time the board made it clear we really need to look at all options and consider a number of different, this is a long answer to your question.
No, that's right.
The fantastic, in our view, Studio Gang Riverfront Concept Plan, which in my understanding, and I recognize I'm a New Memphian, is the first of many plans that takes into account and treats holistically the Memphis riverfront, the whole 6 miles. And one part of that is the Fourth Bluff. And one thing that our board recognized was in that plan, or concept I should say, that the Fourth Bluff, where now the parking facility and the fire station are, which is really the front door of Memphis, a kind of gateway to Memphis, that a cultural anchor or a cultural amenity should be on that site. And that's something that we all really picked up on and saw that opportunity.
And we'll dig into a whole bunch more of everything you said, but I want to get Alan, you in, and you've been on the show recently. Your boss, the mayor, was on recently talking about the Brooks and the excitement of this. You were on the Riverfront Task Force, I believe, that the mayor appointed.
Correct.
From your point of view, and I think it's now official that the mayor has invited, and you know, this was something they were studying. This is now an intent to move down there. The mayor's point of view, why the Brooks? Why downtown?
Well, I think every great city has an art museum downtown. And I think the opportunity to do something really significant on that block of the riverfront is a great opportunity for downtown and tourism in downtown. And I think it also solves some problems long-term in Overton Park in terms of all of the increased use in Overton Park. And it meets the needs of the Brooks. I think it's the type of thing that probably is going to be a lot easier to raise money for because it's going to be iconic, it's going to be game-changing for downtown. It's an opportunity to really put a signature on downtown Memphis. And so I think there'll be lots, I don't want to speak for Emily on that, but we believe there'll be lots of private money and philanthropy money that'll come in and want to be a part of that.
And we'll come back to the funding. It gets into the TDZ and the public and the private and so on. But before I get to Tina, Bill, let's you and I talk. The other news that really was, as best I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that happened simultaneous with this but was not related to it, is that the Memphis College of Art, located in Overton Park, is decided to close its doors, and it's doing kind of a teach down. It will wind down operations over the next, I believe, 2 years. A beloved and historic part of the Memphis community, and then obviously anchored right in Overton Park. Give us some background on MCA deciding to close.
This is something that had probably been in the cards, but I think a lot of people were trying to avoid for several years now. And it's not something that's necessarily unique to Memphis. These colleges of art in other cities have had a difficult time financially. There were some moves made for the Memphis College of Art to open a downtown branch on South Main that just clearly didn't work out. So the decision was made with interim leadership there that really the only course of action at this point was to close. So the classes that are there now will graduate. We'll move toward graduation. That's why the 2-year wind down period. But the Memphis College of Art is not accepting any new students at this point. And so that
and we'll do another show at some point here, and we'll try to get the leadership on and so on. But I think we made a decision not to mix the two issues because they're so different. But for you, Tina, as executive director of the Overton Park Conservancy, and I have to disclose, of course, as I always do, that I am on the board. I'm board chair, I believe, of the Overton Park Conservancy right now. But for you, and you and I have talked about, everyone's talked about what's going on at Overton Park, because these two great institutions are, quote, leaving the park. And so your take on that, the Conservancy does not have formal control over any of the park entities. All, the entities in the park are all separate. But the things you've heard and your reaction to all that's going on.
Well, it'll certainly be a pivotal moment for Overton Park after having these historic, iconic cultural institutions in the park for so long, for so much of the park's history. So it'll be a time of change, but with change comes opportunity. So we'll be looking ahead at what to do next with those two assets within the park, and we'll be working with the leadership of both Brooks Museum and the City of Memphis and the College of Art to help facilitate the conversation about what happens next and what would be an appropriate fit for the park long term.
Yeah. Bill.
Tina, does this give you some new options in terms of the master plan?
Well, so we are planning to launch a master plan in 2018, and it has always been our intention to look at the park holistically through that master planning effort and to look at how all of these institutions work together. We work together informally now. Our staff members communicate with each other, and we look for ways that we can have greater efficiencies in our operations and support each other's programming. And through our master plan, we will now also look at the physical spaces and not quite sure yet exactly what the structure of that will be. Not sure if we'll just have simultaneous planning efforts or if we'll look at everything through one planning effort. But it'll be an opportunity to look at the historic uses of those sites and then what really wide open potential future opportunities are.
So much discussion in kind of a third angle on this about the architecture that the original Brooks represents, and that the Memphis College of Art building designed by Roy Harover represents as well. Do you know at this point if you're looking at a preservation of those two structures in this?
Well, I think it's a little early to talk about the physical spaces. I know that the Brooks Museum has brought in, and I'll let Emily talk about that, but is looking at what the current conditions of the building are and the characteristics of the building. So we'll be getting with some information there, and that'll certainly inform the discussion. And
you also, separate from this, there is the group that's working on the zoo parking expansion, and you now have some preliminary designs from Powers Hill, who is doing the designs on that, and you're getting public input on that, correct?
That's correct. There's a survey out right now where members of the public can weigh in on what they like about each of those three individual concepts, what they don't like about each of those three. I feel very optimistic that we're going to get to some closure on that issue very soon, and we'll be able to really focus on the other areas of the park and bring our master plan coordination back around to all of the park institutions and working together.
And obviously the park and zoo parking has been a controversy for several years now. So when these other separate pieces came up, there was some thought that, okay, is the zoo parking plan or the trajectory that it's on going to change any with Brooks moving out, with the Memphis College of Art closing? Will the zoo parking plans change as a result of those other changes?
I don't anticipate those plans changing. I don't anticipate the design approach changing. And I also don't anticipate the overall needs of park users changing with the move out of these two institutions. We still expect to have something on both of those sites. That's what I assume today. And those new uses will have their own parking needs. They'll have their own stakeholders to weigh in, but right now that's a big unknown. Mm-hmm. But I think it's safe to assume that we're going to have somebody using those spaces and needing parking for them. So, one of the pieces of this zoo parking lot expansion is the anticipation that there will be use of that parking space by some of the other park users. For example, the Levitt Shell using the parking lot during evening events when the zoo patrons are not using that lot. Mm.
Emily, your thoughts on what happens next with, let's just stick with the Brooks Museum, although I'm also curious, just as a neighbor, as it were, your thoughts on MCA. But in terms of the Brooks, what do you see happening there? Will the Brooks have a say in what happens next there, or is it really more handing it off to the next
This is
tenant?
Where the board and staff needs to be Switzerland. We're going to care for and maintain. We've already done some fantastic renovations. The city of Memphis helped us with some of it, but a lot of it we did ourselves, getting ready for the centennial. Until the minute we leave, we will take very good care of the building, leaving it better than when we came in, we hope. But it is not, the building is owned by the city, so it is not in we can't, that's not our decision to make. So our goal is to set up something that's very positive, that's productive, but is ultimately neutral. I've received lots of different phone calls from people with ideas, and that's all great, but I do explain to them it's really the city and OPC will be working on a process, and we will not be involved in that. We want to be helpful to the process, but we won't really have an opinion.
So you, Alan, and the administration is about to take possession. I mean, over the course of time here. I mean, the Brooks thing will take some years, and the MCA is a couple years. You'll have two buildings in Overton Park. Your thoughts on what happens next and what the process should be, and are people calling you and saying, "Hey, Alan, I've got this great idea. I want to put a XYZ into the MCA building"? I've
become a real estate broker. I've got a bunch of calls, just like everybody else around the table. But I think we've got a great opportunity. But I think we need to be very deliberate about it, and we need to be very strategic about it, because one thing we don't need to do is further balkanize Overton Park. And if you put an institution in there that it immediately is at full capacity in a particular building, and they need to grow, then that further impinges on the park. So we need to think about not just what the tenant is and is it compatible, but what's its long-term plan, and is the Overton Park a good site for that? And I didn't realize when I took this job that how much the internal combustion engine was going to figure into my everyday life. But parking is a real issue, and we don't want to further compound the parking problems by putting an office building in there where there's people coming and going and lots of car needs. So I think we've got to be very strategic about it. There are lots of good ideas, and one thing that's interesting is I've heard lots of ideas that may or may not be good in the park, but they're great ideas, and so maybe we can find some other place for them in Memphis. And this, I think, will be a good catalyst for acquiring a lot of good cultural assets in the city.
Just some technicalities here. The city owns the Brooks Museum. The Brooks owns its collection, is that correct?
So basically, over a series of years since 1916, there are a variety of different collections that have come in, and some cities, some us. So it's a little bit more complicated.
The building itself, though,
the building itself belongs to the city, and I should say that MCA owns its building, so it's a slightly different.
Thank you. Yeah. So have you gotten into that yet? I mean, you know, this is all still relatively new, and you have had a lot on your plate, but the MCA owns its building. They have a lease.
They have a ground lease, so the city owns the land. Enter the cadre of lawyers, lots of lawyers.
Okay.
And so really just, it depends. Right now it's all kind of in flux. We were talking before the show about, I believe it's a Memphis Flyer article where there was, some hope that a white knight might ride in and save the situation. And we're going to be very cooperative. I know that Doug McGowan and some of the general services folks have been talking about going in just to look and see what kind of shape the building is in, because if MCA just said here's the keys, they could do that.
Could they? Doug McGowan, who's the COO of the city, before I get to Bill, I mean this isn't a hypothetical, just so so we understand the logistics here of the building. I mean, if MCA owns the building and they've got big debts, and it's a little unclear to me, and I think others, exactly how this wind down happens. I mean, are they free to sell that building without the city's permission, even though or does the lease give you rights to say, well, whoever goes in that building, we have a say over that?
My suspicion, I have not thoroughly reviewed.
Okay, sure.
I told the city attorney, Bruce McMullen, when I came in, when I'm in City Hall, I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
So I haven't reviewed the lease with that in mind, but I would suspect that the city would at least be a player in that.
Because you would think that, who would want to go in without and then immediately be crossways with the city?
Right.
I mean, I guess there's somebody who might, but by and large, most people wouldn't
Right.
want to. Okay. Bill.
Emily, let's talk about the riverfront. Sure. Tell me about what you have now. As we speak this week, there is more confirmation that this is going to happen, that the Brooks is going to move to this riverfront property, but there's still a lot left to be done.
Absolutely. And so where we are right now, and I do want to just add that the Brooks board and staff has been very sensitive to the fact that we have been in Overton Park for 101 years. My first phone call when the board started exploring the idea of a relocation was to Tina, who's been such a great leader within Overton Park. But now that we are planning to move downtown, where we are is getting ready to hire, we've been vetting for the past several months, a major fundraising consultant who will help us with this. We wouldn't have gotten out so far if we didn't already have made significant headway towards what it will take to build this new art museum. We will be working on an architect selection process, which will take anywhere between 6 to 9 months. I think 6 months is a little bit optimistic. Our collection is international, and so we will be casting a very wide net, and we'll go through a very thoughtful and deliberate process, being very sensitive to the site, which in my opinion, and I think it's shared by a lot of international architects who have already called, is some of the best real estate in the world. It's an incredibly beautiful site. It's the Mississippi River. There's a real opportunity here to do something that's quite sensitive to the site. But it's probably a 5-year process. I mean, we're aiming for 2022, and I think what people forget about art museums is once it's built, you still have to test all the climate controls. So there's a several-month period before you even bring in one work of art, much less 10,000 works of art. So there's at least a 6-month process of testing, 6 to 9 months of testing, and then bringing in the collection. So we're looking at 2022, and that is reasonable. It's a pretty tight deadline for an art museum. We think it's doable, barring any sort of unexpected turns.
A couple of questions on it, and I'll go back to Bill. Do you have a budget or even a scale of, what we're talking about in terms of money?
So yes, we do. And it's going to be a little bit of a moving target. What we want to do is to build the endowment. I've been through this before, and I know what happens, and everybody gets excited about the building and gets excited by the architect, and they add more and more and more, and suddenly you've gone over budget. We don't want to do that. We want to have a runway for when we open, and so we're really focusing on the endowment. So for every dollar that goes towards the construction of the new building, a certain percentage will go towards endowment, whether it's 80-20, 75-25, 90-10, we don't know yet. It's too soon.
Right, but you successfully dodged. Do you have a budget or a goal, or you avoid it?
So right
and you
now,
may not be ready to disclose that.
I mean, I think actually anyone could sort of, if they wanted to do their own research, I mean, it would end up being around $110 million.
For just in the
That's
facility.
building, that is endowment.
Building, endowment, and the whole thing. And then,
But remember, with art museums, and this is the part that's really tricky for people, the rule of thumb, you can do it for less. I certainly know art museums who've done it for more, and it's a sticker shock. So everybody, if you have a pacemaker, make sure it's working. $1,000 per square foot is usual for art museums, and I know that that's shocking for people, but people have to remember the kind of climate control, humidity control factors that you have to do for the collection. And we have a duty of care for over 10,000 objects. And so there are certain things that we must do. We are one of 272 accredited art museums in the country. There are something like 30,000, but only 270 or so of them are accredited. We're one of those precious few. So we take very seriously our duty of care.
Those are some of the issues that are with the current site, right? Is climate control and the safety of and the care
and we maintain it, but we've MacGyvered it as far as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Back to Bill.
And in order to get traveling exhibitions, I think people who don't know what goes into these shows, but there are insurance companies that insure these works of art, and nothing moves until they're satisfied that no damage is going to be done.
And thank you for saying that, Bill. We're actually working with an unnamed institution for 4 major loans, and they remembered from the 1990s the challenges to our climate. Now, we maintain it, but it really is as I said, we've MacGyvered our way as far as we can.
Alan, you're going to be involved in the talks, I take it, in working this out. And the mayor has talked about some fundraising. He's also talked about some city funds. Are there parameters on your side of this as these discussions begin about how to finance this?
Well, we've had some discussions about it, and I think when it comes to the art gallery, we'll let Brooks take the laboring oar on that. Just as in economic development situations, Mayor Strickland's policy is to kind of be gap fillers, be the last money in, that sort of thing. One idea that we'll get the site prepared. We're providing the real estate, so that's a significant contribution, and we'll be there. The tourist development zone. We're asking the state to extend the qualified public use to include the riverfront, which also would include this project, and so there'd be some money for that. But we're trying to put a seed in each one of these projects rather than trying to build one project with all of the TDZ money we'll be getting.
How did Mud Island end up getting linked to this? Was that an opportunity that the city saw to have, since they're right across the harbor from each other on this?
Well, I don't think you can talk about Mud Island without talking about a southern connection to downtown. Every plan that's come about in the last 20 years has said there needs to be some sort of southern connection to downtown. In fact, one even had a land bridge that made a lake out of the Wolf River Harbor. And so the opportunity to do a connector that would connect this project with a proposed Center for Freshwater Studies and possibly an aquarium on Mud Island really, I think, gives juice to both projects and turns maybe the Brooks from a, if a new and improved Brooks on the river would, and I'm making this number up, would generate 500,000 people and a year in visitors, and an aquarium might generate another 500,000 people. I think it might even be 600,000 between the two of them. So I think it really does give a lot of synergy, and a lot of it really does rest on whether or not we can get this TDZ extension so that we can use some of that money to fund it.
And when do you find out about that?
Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have either an official or unofficial nod on that direction.
And this TDZ, just because there's so much going on, is entirely separate from the Fairgrounds TDZ.
Entirely separate from the fairgrounds.
Same law, same, but they're separate funding. One might get approved, the other might not. I mean, they are separate.
They're on complete separate tracks, yes, and self-contained.
I want to, just a couple of minutes left. I want to come back to something, Emily. And I'm sure you've been asked, and I actually I've seen you be asked at a forum I was at. When you talk about raising that amount of money, a certain number of people say, well, why not raise that money and invest it in the existing facility? There are problems, as you articulated, and we've written about and other people have written about, because you've talked about some of the issues with why not put that money into the existing site given the 100-year history there?
I think that we have physical constraints within the site that we're on. I think our board is very proud of Overton Park. We probably have some board members maybe even in common, or at least supporters in common. And if you look at some of the options for staying where we are, the one that the board was gravitating to would include taking over more of the precious parking space that we already have. It means more concrete in a green park, not less. And regardless of how OPC and the public feels about that, our board is not necessarily convinced that that's a good idea for the park. So believe it or not, the board was considering all of the different options and also thinking about what the impact would be for Overton Park. And actually one of the conclusions was sort of relieving some of that congestion, kind of lets out some of the air, so to speak. I'm mixing metaphors left and right. But we would end up with what is already 3 different building campaigns knit together. Anyone who has been to the building will know that we have some wasted space.
Okay, and I apologize. I'm going to have to cut you off, but I appreciate the answer to the question. I know you've talked in other articles, and there'll be more conversation about this. I want to thank you all for being here. We'll be off next week. Everyone enjoy Thanksgiving. See you in 2 weeks.